Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Desk Session 97. It is I, Carl DeGregorio. We are moving along. 97. There was a blizzard in 97 in New York City, I remember well. While it was inconvenient, it was a good time of life where either I had the night off and didn't have to make it into work, so I got what I remember as one of my first adult snow days. But in New York City, when it snows, you'd still have to get out in the streets, and you would see cabs abandoned in the middle of the street. You would see people cross-country skiing because the snow was packed so good on the streets. And not every bar was open, and not everything was open except what would be now known as the essentials. I remember going to a bar on, I think, Thompson Street. Maybe it was Sullivan, but it was a bar called Milady's. I don't know if it's still there. It was kind of a dive bar, and everybody was in there just dripping, not dripping, but trudging snow and slush into the bar, and had a linoleum tile floor and a jukebox, and a good time was had at Milady's that day. That was kind of a very free-range, impromptu, let's go to a bar up the street that we see every day that we never set foot in, but some brave bartender or owner decided to punch in the 4 code and said, fuck it, I'll open and see what happens, and I hope we tipped well. But those are the kind of things that happen in blizzards and in New York City. And sort of those moments of community and shared hardship, if you will, that bring people together rather than freak people out. And not to get into an East Coast, West Coast thing, but the things that befall you in New York are just different by nature of their climates and the things that can happen there, and a blizzard is a whole different thing than, say, a fire or, that doesn't really build community the same way if you're lucky to survive these things. 9/11 being this sort of freakish, it wasn't an act of God. It was an act maybe quite the opposite, but and there was a sense of communal mourning, and I've spoken about that. And I guess I can say it now. You can catch. I'll try to put this in the. I'll put it in the share box that I was on a buddy's podcast. Stop, Drop, and Rawle. As my World Cup runneth over, I think is the episode, and we talked about World Cup, and that's why last week was sort of a shortened one because I was sort of spent on that. And I don't know, I was holding back because these things, you want to see them week to week and before the next one arrives. But I'll include that. And we didn't really get into much, but I did sort of make the correlation between the Knicks was a communal celebrating of 50 years of strife in championship drought, but it was a big release and maybe noticed by the world because of maybe even since 9/11 there haven't been that many things to celebrate on a citywide scale, and I don't like to I'm wary of that comparison because one is life and death and another one is celebrating a sport. And I mentioned it on, I kind of saved it for my own thing, but I mentioned it on, and I may have mentioned it before, but I said on my buddy's podcast that the reason sports resonates for me, I don't know if they resonate for everybody in the arts, but, and it kind of goes back to the sentiment of Earl Warren, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for many years during the tumultuous 60s. I guess he was there with Thurgood Marshall, et cetera, et cetera. And he said that and this was a thing called newspapers, he said he would read the sports page first because that was a recounting of men's triumphs, and that the front page with all its war and poverty and natural disasters or corruption was full of men's losses. I really butchered that. I said it a lot smoother on the on the other. So one is the sports page triumph and front page failure. There it is. Jesus Christmas in Wales. I like to get through those cleanly, but that's not the point of this show or channel. And I've also come to think of it as a verbal, which is probably the antithesis of what a sage and or a monk or a practitioner would tell me. But this is almost, like I said, a verbal meditation. I don't know if any such thing exists, but I say so only because I am not scrolling. I am not actively participating in media other than creating it. And I'm not editing, and I literally press start and we go until I hit the space bar and end it. And that's what this winds up being. And so when you're trying to make content in the short form and you have to find clippable things, you want to have quotes. Like, that would be great to say that Earl Warren said he reads the sports page first to see men's triumphs, because on the first front pages, it's all of men's failures, right? And even that wasn't that clean. But that's why there's the difference between reading copy and prompter and doing this kind of thing. And if we are paying attention to the way the landscape is, this is sort of how younger people are catching their information, because the stodgy teleprompter, morning show, CNN type of thing, reading copy, it has lost a bit of its luster. Which is a shame, because at a certain point, the essay is a very interesting way to, basically you basically wrote something and then it goes in the teleprompter. So you're just reading out an essay. And I do like essays. Obviously, Bill Maher still does his essay and or op-ed or whatever you want to call it at the end. Dennis Miller used to do his rant at the end of everything. And it's just a place to stick the host of the show's editorialization or their stamp, their personality, their voice, and a direct to camera. This is what I feel. This is what my blog started out as when I was doing it, trying to do just a column a week. I would write an essay, and I thought that the desk session, when I was just figuring that out, I was going to try to do a Philip Marlowe kind of good morning and good night, smoke-filled me in a desk, a vintage desk, doing my essays verbally to the camera. That was the first idea. And then I toyed around with teleprompter apps, and you couldn't get that right in dead into the camera, eye contact, and teleprompter is operated, I think, by a toggle or even a joystick or some variation of that, where they pause when you pause and they get into your cadence, and that's a whole job on the production team. And doing it automatedly is not proficient, so you would have to you couldn't belabor your points, you couldn't breathe in your moments. And again, I put almost everything through an acting lens, where even an essayist would have to take a moment to be affected by their own words. But that's not often how it goes. And that's why, things are different when you split the mediums up. I've said that before. Everything is an acting exercise. Everything, a song. That's how I know I don't sing as well as some people, but I can act, I think, at a high level. So I can be on pitch, and I have what range I have, but I can quote, act a song. And so, that's where you would have, like, for instance, Bob Dylan is much maligned for his voice, but he can sing on pitch. He wrote the songs, the authority of the poet and the delivery system. All of that transmutes to me beauty. And whether or not you would ever hire him to sing in Aida, probably not. But, that's not the assignment. He's really kind of has the gravitas to deliver his songs. Whatever, I used to like U2 before they got campy, let's say, and uber successful, but all the way up through, I guess, Achtung Baby, I was still kind of on that tip. And for whatever you think, Bono can put a song across emotionally, right? And then, of course, Bruce, and then even Prince. He couldn't really translate in his acting in his films, but he could really, Purple Rain, if it has emotion. And some of the great examples of great acting moments in singing are Bonnie Raitt's I Can't Make You Love Me If You Don't. That's a moment. Donny Hathaway's A Song for You is a moment. obviously Jennifer Holliday in Dreamgirls, which is a musical theater show with a book, so she's definitely acting, but also singing. I would put Irene Cara in there, who's made my all-time list. Out Here on My Own, What a Feeling, Fame. Anytime you hear her sing, she never really got the canon catalog she deserved, in my opinion. And I might even throw, just as I'm riffing, I would throw, George Michael had some powerful vocal performances that were also, for me, through an acting lens, powerful. I'm thinking about Jesus to a Child. I'm thinking about Father Figure, One More Try. He's got a few of these really intimate songs. And funky, but he's not always thrown into that emotive Adele can sing a song and act it in a way. And so these monologists, these sort of teleprompter DJs, whatever the fuck they are, they're trying to keep emotion out of it. And I one thing Zoom did teach me, or misteach me, or miseducate me on, is that if you have to stay on book in a scene, in an online acting sentiment, that you can get seriously good performances with the script handy, and if you're connecting to the lens, which would be your partner, and doing that I can understand sometimes why cue card actors, famously like Marlon Brando and Johnny Depp's known to use an earpiece. Like, I could see how that could be effective ways to perform in very short clips. But again, a newsmaker, a comedian, a monologuist, it's not necessary. You're just not going to have as much breath in your delivering your essay if you're not thinking as an actor. And that's how I do. And I imagine that would be how better or worse bookstore readings might go. The advent of the audio book has probably put a premium on that, but I'm remiss that I didn't do my technology was a little behind, or I was a little behind keeping up with technology. I didn't do an audio book for my book, and that is a regret and a lament, but it's hard to go back to it because the person who wrote that book, the sentiments inside would be hard to sort of channel back into. And again, as an actor, I probably could deliver a performance, but it would hearken to things that hopefully I've made some progress on as a developing human being. And so I guess that would be sort of a theme today about preparation, about basically preparation, because the teleprompter is, I don't know how cold they go into those. I don't know what their deadlines are. I don't know when the scripts are accomplished. I know for an evening news, it's probably pretty hot off the press. I'm pretty sure they don't get a run through. I'm pretty sure that's why the syntax is kind of at its simplest for that purpose alone. But so I would imagine, but something like a weekly show, I think the preparation for the essay at the end would be pretty high. It'd be more like doing a speech, doing a TED Talk, being a keynote, that you'd be pretty dialed into your material. And I bring that up because this week I did a play reading at one of the finer schools in the Southern California area, with a strong theater department, let's just put it at that, with an old mentor of mine. This sort of all, if you recall, just an out-of-the-blue, long-time catch-up old friend needed help with the self-tape, and then this sort of snowballed into getting a burger, and now this, and I guess like my girlfriend says, she's in sales, top of mind is where you want to be. And this was more of an opportunity to commune with art, not an opportunity, but yet it was public to a degree, and there'd be an audience and other actors, and it's a great place to practice, a great place to work on craft in a low stakes or any stakes, some stakes, I would say some stakes, and to really communicate a play, which is a whole different from the sides you get for self-tapes. A play's got a lot more words, it paints with words rather than images. So it is on the actor to have moments that can elucidate and bring those words to life. And, acting techniques don't talk about that, but that is essentially from the drone view, the overhead view. An actor's job is to bring the words to life, the play to life. And so in the content era where you have non-performers just drilling the same self-help, insipid listicles at you, and to varying degrees of ability, that's not acting per se. Some better actors would hopefully be in the high end of that ability. But to deliver a play, to present a play in a reading form, we were doing it with music stands and entering and exiting. So there was some proficiency of ability this would not have, again, much like when I did the self-tape with my friend, and how fast and how good and how well prepared he was, even if for me being the reader, the proficiency, the level, the skill set, this was similar to that, and maybe more so because now you have attention spans to fight. And modern day attention spans. The play we read was from, I think, the mid 90s, something that went up at Lincoln Center. So, and it was comedy, tragedy. It was very good play by Howard Corder, and who more famously wrote Boy's Life, another big hit of the late 20th century. And I was originally slated to play a track of characters spread out, and when you understand, when you're a commissioned playwright or a playwright who's been produced and had a hit, he's writing almost as many characters in the dramatis personae as a musical would have. He had spectator 1, waiter 1, scab number 1, foreman, all these, and I don't know how many of those roles were doubled on Broadway or at Lincoln Center or off Broadway. I don't know how many roles were doubled. I'd imagine maybe two characters. You'd get a track where you did two, sort of like an ensemble in a musical. But I don't know. Did they have enough of a budget, or is that the thing where you get a one-line part and that's your part, and there were no doubles? I should have sort of looked into that. But that was a conversation I had with one of the actors. I said, wow, look at all this cast of characters. I said, this is a guy who knows he's going to get produced, because you wouldn't, anytime you do a short film, you don't write a chariot race unless you have a lot of money to pull that off. I guess now that's one of the promises of AI, is that you could, in your own short film, use AI to create a chariot race with your actor. And I don't know if that's a good thing. Because I don't know that the epics are, for me, that's definitely not where the acting is at a premium. As someone who thinks that they can woo and wow a crowd in a fluorescent room on a campus in Southern California, with all the lights up, no effects, and script in hand, I don't know. That was never going to be my bag anyway. But I think is still the requirement. I do pray that that will be the thing that cannot be delivered, even with the spectacle. And we'll buy it for snippets, like we've bought for snippets with CGI. But like those Godzilla movies bombed, and I don't know if any of them have done well, because it used to be a guy in a suit knocking into power lines, and it used to be caught on the imagination of a kid on a Saturday afternoon watching in New York, Channel 5, Channel 9, or Channel 11, I can't remember, but... And then when the whole thing was just green screened or CGI, it's like, okay, yeah. So, and how good can the story be if it's like, it's the scientist who let him out of the sewer or whatever the origin story? It's like the acting can't really be at a premium. But when you're doing a play reading, it's then given back to the actor. And so, like I said, I was given a track of several characters to write, and that would have been a fun assignment. And but someone had a conflict, and so I got bumped up to only being able to read one of the characters, and that was helpful, because then I didn't have to stay locked in the reading to vary characterizations and change voices and do do that shtick, I could just zone in on the character. And it just was easier to prepare. And it was, I don't know how much notice anybody else got. These are pretty quick, but I also put in, I don't know how many hours, not too, I read the play once through, not with a concern for reading it for performance. I wanted to know what happened. You do that one time, and then you start going through it with the parts you got to play, And then when I had to, with maybe 4 days to go, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, I was told to focus on one character, and so then I had to go through it again, and then isolate the scenes, and then drill the scenes, not to get off book, which was and that's one of the beauties of doing play readings or table reads, is that the better prepared you are, the more fluent, the more you can pick your head up, the more you can connect, but you don't have the pressure of having to memorize. Although some of the actors I've worked with, and one in particular who already had the job, wanted to go to the table read off book. So as to set a tone and to show out that he was prepared. And if you have heard the horror stories or the harsh realities of show business, that table read is the final audition. That is not a place to ease up, because people get replaced at the table read all the time. But anyway, that's a story for a different day. But and I'm sounding technical, and I'm turning this into a joyless thing. But I ran it enough to where I was this close to being sick of it with the time I was given, and then I had to rest. I had to give myself a break. Also looming on the horizon is a headshot session, which has become I've blown this thing out of proportion of importance, I'm sure, just by even mentioning it again or at all. And the amount of shopping I've done, and the styling, and all the thoughts I have about it. And maybe I'm overthinking, but I'm trying to really turn a corner, and this is all helpful. And then, of course, I have a looming short film on the horizon that requires some rehearsing and some read-throughs, and I just need to get through this gauntlet of the headshots and the close and that reading. And what happened, and I don't know, I only share this to share ultimately the positive ending, the happy ending, the upshot, I think. Upshot. But I'm leery, because there's a mind-body connection, and for the artist, it's not that we do anything extraterrestrial or special, but for the artist, many of the time, just because of where art is situated in our culture, maybe not France, maybe not other places, but there is an anxiety, personality, some trauma-based magnet to the arts, let's just say. And that doesn't apply to everyone, but for me, let's just do that. And I only bring this up to bring up that knowing all this, getting all my reps, getting all my pictures, waiting for certain things to show up in the mail that I need for, the 2 days from now, things I got to iron, things I got to try on, see if they fit, colors I got to, getting t-shirts, blah, blah, blah. So there's a crunch and there's a pressure, and then you have to try to get sleep and hydrate, and I don't know what I look like. Hopefully I'll get some makeup, but I got ill. I caught a fever. I came back from a walk, and I guess I was exerting energy, and it was hot, so I don't think just sweating causes a fever. But I was a little run down, feeling a little blah, and I crashed. I came home after a walk and passed out for 2 hours, 2 hard hours, and woke up and I checked my temperature, and it was a 101. And then my mind starts racing. And I've read too much, mostly probably self-help, and I've read a lot of I don't know if it's from Artist Way, a lot of these sort of fix yourself mantras and books is, there's a subconscious thing that, of course, you're going to get sick when stuff starts to go your direction, and I don't like that I am victim to that, and that my subconscious is still, quote unquote, running the show. And I freaked out, and I was like, I can't cancel. I can't afford this to go south. I can't cancel on this reading. They ain't going to refund you for the headshots. You got to look your best. You can't go in there all like fluish, And somehow I pushed through, and the reading had a few buttons to press for me. Maybe this was not as prevalent in my youth, or maybe not as prevalent in New York, because I had more fluency. You could get to places on foot. If you got stuck in a cab, you could jump out, or you could, I don't know. It's just the traffic. Where I had to go was an hour away, and where I had to park. And usually that stuff freaks me the fuck out, but I gave myself plenty of time. I was shooting to be hour and a half early, or an hour early anyway. So I was uncharacteristically kind of peppy and just driving along, and I was doing okay. And I parked on the campus and paid for it, and had to walk a bit, and showed up. And I was very lucky because I was there with my friend who is an actor and a professor also, and introductions were going swimmingly, and it was good to see him, and it was a home game. Okay, like, let's go with another sports analogy. Even though it was an away location for me, it was a home game, because your mentality is your thing to address, your mood, your preparation, your anxiety. It's still a you problem and a you issue. And so and if you're lucky, the home, meaning what I mean to say by home game, it was away. I'd never been there. Those are usually anxiety ridden things, but I was prepared. We were only doing a reading, and my buddy was there, and I was looking forward to it because I have fond memories of being in those rooms, on those campuses, even if it was a million years ago, and if it was 3,000 miles away. These are young versions of myself back in the day, I would imagine, and it was, past and present students and current students, mostly past and present. I was the only non-alum of that particular university, and so I was singled out, and in a very kind way. And my friend, who's become quite an educator and a director and an actor, and you can just see it's his it's a leadership role that he takes very well, I should say. And I want to move into maybe coaching more and directing and working with actors, and I could pick up a few things, but it's mostly the assurity, the someone's in charge here. Someone did the stuff. Someone's going to do a curtain speech. Someone printed this stuff out. Someone's over communicating in emails. That's all fine, and that's part of leadership and being a teacher and molding these people. And so being around these students reminded me of myself, and also like the fact that I was comfortable right away, soaking it up, kind of glad for the chance to work. I won't, get into the particulars, but this person I know was once close with Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, among the many brilliant things he did as an actor, some of his interviews have poignant moments where he said, if someone is investing in you, always find any place to act, a reading, a scene study class, a short film. If someone's investing in you to act, that's never turn that option down, or get as many of those as you can. And one of my big youth is wasted on the young regrets is that, through this bit of a triangle, there was a production, and I could have played a small role if I could get to the first table read of a Shakespeare play, and I couldn't pull off getting my shift covered at work in New York, and I had to pass. And or I probably chose to not take the route of success. At the time, I was perhaps being self-abusive. I don't know. Again, not that person's problem, not anybody's problem. But when I found out about the end of the show, or after it had already come and went, that it was a play being directed by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And not that that would have changed anything, but that is the kind of professional you want to work with. That is the kind of person you want to see if you have game against, or just to learn something, and just to be in a room reading it, and then eventually to do a production. And like he said in this interview, I don't forget where it was, but find places where you're acting, And so without any promise of anything, that's what this was. And it was 11 actors doing the same thing, and excited about it, and putting out their best effort, and doing their best, and being very talented and bubbly, and having good instincts, and just reading it, and like at a level that you need to even be in the ballpark of competing on a level. Everybody was there, and it was exciting to see. And then if there was not a lot of nerves, it was just a reading, but there was and you got to be careful about trying to please and playing for results and all that stuff. But I kind of had an inkling on the character that he was the energy, he was a catalyst, he was a comic, in a serio, a dramedy sort of, or serious drama, but had moments of levity. He was it. And definitely a New York character, definitely a lot I could bring to it personally. And I was milking it for sure. And I made my entrance too soon. I was sort of halfway through stage reading to literal reading, and I was holding my script up and probably pushing a little bit too much. If we were in week 2 of rehearsal, the director's like, I think you're probably, you're getting on your feet a little too soon, the director might say. I was definitely doing that, but it was also, I'm the outsider, I'm the non-alumnus. He did point out I was from CMU, and one of the students was like jokingly said boo, and I'm like, yeah, like there's some weird drama school beef like there is between Ohio State and Michigan football fans. We were joking about how, nerd alert that is to, beef with another BFA program, But that's the esprit de corps, the fun part of, after all these years, and they may be younger imprints but it's good to know that is still how it is, that there's still this bond, and that the fun, between rehearsals and the sitting on institutional couches, highlighting your scripts, like all that stuff was beautiful to be a part of. And I wanted to show out. I wanted to be, a good faith rewarded to my friend. And then because he was there to read stage directions, to keep the body of the play moving, he didn't do entrances and exits. He just read like he takes out a knife, a safe falls on his head, whatever, right? That's a tough assignment because I usually glaze over when I'm reading them, so sometimes I glaze over at a reading when they're being read, so it's not always the easiest assignment. But he would also laugh and enjoy as almost a sideline spectator. He was off stage left, and but when he would react to his students, I wasn't pandering to him, but I was definitely saying, well, you're going to love this when I give you some of this, and I was prepared enough to give it a little juice, let's say. Again, in a technique class, in a scene study class, a lot of this stuff is not conducive to discovery, not conducive to being organic. I'm speaking in a result term, and I think my approach to teaching acting or coaching for scenes and stuff is, unfortunately, you do have to play for results. When a director on a set says, I need you to amp this up, you can tell them all about your moment before entering. You can tell them about what your character's journal says, but if you can't get there, you do have to sort of play for how it's going to go, and I know that's controversial to a lot of, Meisner in the moment type of people. And I'm not saying I wasn't in the moment. I'm just saying I was freed by when you're reading and you're still on book. It's how fast you can remember, but you're not off book, but you're fluent, and so you can get in a rhythm. And if you're down too much, you lose connection, but you can't come up too much. You're in that limbo of connecting and missing words, saying the inverse of what the sentence is. These are all things on a textual basis that if you're doing a reading, you have to basically recant, not recant, or you're encanting the play. So you got to be, accuracy would be probably the premium at a reading versus connecting. And in a rehearsal, you can get there and then have the stage manager say you're way off on the lines, and then you get to the point where you are off book and you're word perfect, but you pretty much shouldn't be off too far when you got the damn thing in your face. But eyes being what they are at my age, I was wearing glasses. I needed to prepare to mitigate mistakes, to be honest. And so maybe, I don't know. And it's not for me to guess, wonder, or worry, but I don't know how much time everybody else put individually as far as man hours, and I'm sure they got busy lives. We all do. I just happen to know what I needed to feel comfortable. And it's not that I wish I knew. I don't know if that's just a Carnegie Mellon theater school ethic. I don't know what the options are for other people. I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just saying I know what I need to feel comfortable. I mean, I've told you my anxiety on being punctual has led me to drive to places the night before to see what the parking is like. All of these things to mitigate. If I had an audition back in the in-person days and they were at weird times, I would leave mad early, sit in the car for an hour. All of these things to mitigate the freak out of being late and not knowing where you're going and factoring in like sometimes 45 minutes for what the fuck is the parking situation, and then the more comfortable you get, the more often you return to these places, then I can always, if I get really hard up, I'll go blah blah blah, there's meters over there, I can walk in from there if I buy something at the fucking Whole Foods and I used to put the receipt in the dash and say don't tow me. And I know I'm drinking a lot more than usual. It's just hot and I'd have to turn the AC off. But I was probably still a little less prepared than I would want to be had I more time. But you also want to keep some of the life in it and see what other people bring. And you never forget talking and listening and responding. And so I hope it doesn't come across that I was gimmicking it up and shticking it up, which I was. But I think within the realm of what was required. And all I mean about the home game is I felt like I was almost like he was a lifelong friend, a coach, a mentor, fellow actor. But like when I would hear him laugh, it's because I knew I was in the pocket. You know what I mean? Oh, wait till you get a look. Like when a jazz musician's having a hot set and you're like, when the bass player looks at the drummer, or that's my favorite part about watching live music is when they're doing stuff, we do a scale in the middle, and the musicians just laugh at dumb shit that isn't funny, but like it's musical. Like some guy did a triple note, or he went B flat and whatever, and they try to compete with comedians, and you're just like, yeah. But when they're on stage and they're vibing, I love that shit. And actors have their own jargons and stuff. I love all of it, and it reminded me to hopefully be around it more. And what a great way to lead into, the headshots and the short film and the end of summer and hopefully the resumption of some kind of uptick in auditions again, and doing it for the love of doing it primarily. And because I was around a lot of young people, I didn't play any of that corny, like, let me talk about Gen Z, I'm Gen I didn't do any of that. I just fucking rapped with people and talked normally. And I'm glad to know that, like, those theater kids aren't different, that they're already marching to a different drum, so that they wouldn't play those ageist games either, And part of that was also like, let me show you the old bull can still fucking run. And so I really had a great time, and it was memorable. The crowd responded. Everybody responded. It was just a good night, and it reminded me, and it brought me back, and it felt like no time. No friend well met of the new people. The transients, the almost by the end of a 2-hour, 3-hour communing, we're pals, and we'll never see each other again, or maybe we will. And in those melancholic moments, and my buddy's really been so consistently over the years reminding me that was what we signed up for. I also got to work on my own. He was proudly saying, I've known this guy since he was a sophomore in high school when I was substitute teaching. He was explaining, and everybody's like, oh, wow, you guys knew each other. And then I said, yeah. And then he told them, about some of the opportunities that were presented to him that were then presented to me. And then I said, and thanks to that, now I have a year in the a lifetime in the arts, as if it's been tough. And people chuckled and we made jokes about it. But that's the part I want to purge, if I would, that sort of defeatist stuff, I tried to imbue that to the people sitting next to me. I asked him about the program, how long he'd been out, and asked him if he was working. I just was like, do you have simpatico with other students here, And he talked about, I told him it was smart to go to school in Los Angeles because you're in the belly of the beast, whereas Pittsburgh, you had to kind of be introduced to the city, and you find out the mafias, the cliques in Los Angeles are a lot mightier. And that, the thing you forget about the size of school and the ratio of teacher to student, all that stuff. You go to Michigan, you're going to find a Michigan person in every fucking city in America. And that alumni strength is part of what you might want to think about in terms of where you go to college. And while I like where I went, it just doesn't have it's rare to run into a fellow alum. And maybe not so much in the TV and film, and certainly not in the theater, but you have to sort of work in the world and find your way into it. And anyway, so good for them. But he was made the same kind of gallows humor. I also like to, I like that I went to school here, but I also like coming out of school with huge debt. And I'm like, I hear you, and that's a damn shame that people have that. But if I just would want them to not bemoan their outcast state, to not give in to, rage into that dark night, and to, you're not too far out of school and you're still doing play readings, and you still know that guy over there who was my professor, and we're still doing the thing. And the quote by another actor, Ethan Hawke, who I think was pals with Phil Seymour Hoffman, he said, if you don't want to be doing coaching or acting or doing a production or being a community college acting teacher, if that doesn't seem like something you want to do, then get the fuck out, And my buddy who brought me in, he's the one who kind of came up with that when we went out for burgers. And I was like, yeah, I get it. It's easy for them to say, but I get what he's saying. And that's how excited I was, how excited I am to even share this story about a reading for 15 people in a room somewhere in Southern California. And I might not overstate it, but I sweated. Good sweat. I was overdressed. I was I had to walk. I was sweating. And I had just had the fever, the day before. So I don't want to overstate it, in Joan of Arc type of... It was almost as if I sweated out whatever gave me that fever kind of snapped as I sweated through my craft and having such a good time at this reading. And I may be overstating it, or maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe the dam had to break, and I had to breathe and remind myself that, this is closer to home for me and a good place for me to be. And more, yes, please, Amy Poehler's book title, Yes, Please. And to when you hear a student just getting started lamenting his debt, I understand that. But there is a lot of, between A-list movie star and all the way down to just starting out in drama school, there is a life to live. And I wish I would have been able to be more grateful, more present in it, more available to the beauty that life brings out off stage, you know. I'm learning, and that's another thing, is I'm not done learning. I learned a lot. My anxiety was so minimal, and a lot of these before mentioned obstacles are just living, and I've made some progress on that, you know. And I had a good time, and my faculties were with me, you know, all these things, you know, that I'm on this push, you know, to not do it in a messianic way or in a cult leader way, but I used to always comment on the people that, and they were rare to me, but people who would enter a room and like change the atoms. And I think I can say assuredly without, and I don't mean it's not maybe anything I've done, but I think I am one of those people. And so, and if you're doing it right and you're not holding back and you're not trying to make somebody unseen, maybe even unalive, feel like I'm not sucking the oxygen out of the room or playing small so that other people, you know, that whole notion that a lot of actors have. I'm not doing anybody any harm, and I'm just filtering through the spark that comes through me. And so when I'm being funny and trying to win people over, is it people pleasing? I don't know. I think it's just my nature to be comedic, to express myself, to use my voice, my gifts. And so yeah, the smallest things. And so hopefully this momentum, which is rare, not rare, but there's so much of this in our career that you have to sometimes be aware when you're in momentum and in flow, and it doesn't always add up to the thing you think it's going to be. But and the gratitude of this is one of the upticks. When the world is telling you the industry is over, the world is telling you it's worse than it's ever been, and yet how is it possible to feel good about what you're doing day to day? Well, it is because you don't filter that stuff through your very precarious sieve, which is your nose, your breath, your ears, your eyes. You're the sieve, you're the filter, and that filter can take impurities on. Half the atmosphere is impurities, half the food we eat is impurities, half the stuff we ingest media-wise, earworms, listening to people complain, the people you choose to talk to, all of that can be impurities. And the immune system can get worn down, the emotional immune system. And I do believe that, I know the arts aren't a healer. You're the healer using art. I know that. I've understood that. But you get to decide, and you get to kind of put it out. And you have to be at your best to do these things, health-wise, emotional-wise. And being neurotic does not help a good goddamn thing. Your character can be neurotic. In fact, most of them are, right? And life is not, stage and film, they're not life, right? Because there's a podcast, a very well-known one called The Rewatchables. Bill Simmons and The Ringer, big, very successful media commentator and his crew. And in The Rewatchables, they have these categories. And one of the categories, are we sure this guy is good at his job? Because... And then the comedy and the podcast and the conversation ensues to let everybody know that if Sea of Love with Al Pacino, he's sleeping with the suspect, that he'd be a terror. If this were real life, he'd have been fired. He'd have been shot. The characters we enjoy watching on film aren't well-adjusted people, because that's not dramatic, right? Hamlet doesn't have his shit together. Macbeth is getting run ragged by his fucking wife, and he's a murderer. You know what I'm saying? Julius Caesar's about politics and how many snakes lay in the grass and hypocrisy and, what Iago does to Othello. These aren't we're not here to watch. And the problem with social media is like a lot of the content, which is why it's not art, is a lot of the content is about high functioning, low functioning, raising your fucking 401k or getting more big. It's not interesting, but it's addictive. You know what I mean? And so you wouldn't watch, Iago is literally like a chaos maker. He's ruining his master's life because he can, It's Machiavellian in the dramatic form. Do you know what I mean? And then the comedies. Midsummer Night's Dream is the gods are fucking with us. You know what I mean? And we are too easily fooled. And what fools these mortals be. So... But that is for your character. For you, you have to sleep well, eat well, think well, pray well, be kind well, hopefully have relationships and not live in the depravity or the deprivation or the forced monastic or for me, like living in this lack because I thought that I have to earn it the hard way, or, not showing out. Don't be a braggart. Don't be too pleased with yourself. You have to purge a lot of that before you can just get up on a music stand, look at the script, know you looked at it, and be funny, joyful, be crude, rude, not too nice, play the character, play the moments, play. My great coach, Robert Colt, says it's called a fucking play. It's not called a work, And that's why I've held out so long, because it is a play. They are players, and we are players, and not everybody gets to do it. People got to go down in those mines, and they deserve their dignity, but I'm holding out because I want to play. And that's why it's hard. That's why so few get to do it, because everybody would if they could. I want to do the thing we used to do when we were little, which is play house, play war. I want to do it with the actual costumes on and with an age-appropriate actor across from me and fake blood and all that stuff. It's crazy that I still want to do it. But I understand now why it's hard to do and how much you got to declutter and how well you have to try to be to do it, and sacrifices. I think I was all sacrificing and none of the, I lost some of the joy, some of the threads, and everything had to be a win-loss column, a front page, a sports page, front page kind of binary, that, and then survival and, I don't even have that job that I held on to and didn't do a play, with a master of the theater because I couldn't get the night off. I didn't have the courage then to say, fuck this. I'm here to be an actor, not a bartender. And I don't want to belabor that too much. I did that more than a few times. And maybe we have to do that. And maybe this is the first time in my life I'm saying I'm investing in myself. I'm doubling down. I've ordered clothes. I have like a $100, $150 denim shirt. You know what I'm saying? I'm putting together combos of clothes that, I'm just updating versions of things I've worn in headshots before, and they say to wear your own shit, but I'm trying to have a thought about what it's going to look like, how it's going to help me, what's going behind the eyes, all these things. And maybe it's not haphazard. Maybe it's just as risky as it was then, probably more so because of the, it's just being a little braver. And if any of those fellow actors from that reading, just pay attention to, those moments of opportunity. They're not as rare as you think, but they are. It's just putting more quills, more bullets in the chamber. I don't want to use that violent term, but just like Philip Seymour Hoffman said, just act as much as you can. And remember that, you're not working for free. Even this play reading, they invested. They had to rent the space. They had to print the scripts. They bought bottled water and markers, and it's not a zero. You're not receiving pay, but you're not working for free because an investment was made to do your acting for an audience, to change an idea in someone's head, to be remembered down the line. If one person sitting there says that guy was really good or that guy was really good, I wish them well. That can't be an exchange of energy that wasn't worth it, or it's not to be overlooked. To have people rooting for you, like you show up in one of their nighttime shows, and I saw that dude. Holy cow! That is what we're kind of living in the whim of, and it's the thing of dreams. But it wasn't a free thing. It was me lending my talents for repetition, because some of the kids are saying, "Man, I'm a little rusty." Like, you could hear that because the nerves kick in and you haven't been reading, and that's why you stay in class, why you do readings, why you do shorts, why you even do your headshots over and over. It's to stay in the game, to stay in the flow of what we're here to do. And so we will move along, and I'll just say a great gratitude. I'll let you know how the pictures go. World Cup is still going on there. I'll put some stuff in the box. I still have to get this out, even though I should be resting for headshot day and for rehearsal and all that. And remember, I use the word, I just got to get through this gauntlet. No, it's the good stuff. Stressing out about getting to the rehearsal is the good stuff. It's better than the alternatives. And, I do have a line in my play, and it's not a very profound moment, and I probably don't want to set it up and ruin the moment, but it has to do with my first day back in an acting class after a long hiatus, and how an actress approached me and said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I was like, "Huh? Sure, yeah, I'll take a hug," And she said it was her last day in class, and it was my first day. And I had done a little reading, and I did really well, and felt the warmth of being appreciated in my element. And it pops off me. I'm sorry if it's not clear to you, but it's clear to people. Like, when you're in your flow or whatever light emanates, and maybe that's what happened. But she just gave me a hug, and but it was unverbal. She just said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "This is my last class." I said, "Oh, well, that's too bad." And the line in the play is, I wanted to shit on it. I wanted to make a joke. I wanted to think about her a certain way in terms of like being a hippie, or, oh, here's another crazy actress or whatever. But instead of going the cynical route, I'm butchering my own lines. And in my mind, I was kind of rapid firing through that. And then instead, I just sort of took the hug, accepted it. And in the nonverbal of it, I realized why she hugged me, and it was because it felt like she was welcoming me home. And that's a big outro to a scene in the show, and hopefully that doesn't, spoiler alert, a one-man show that probably you're not going to see, not because I'm not going to do it, but because this is YouTube, and you weren't at this reading either, and these things are ethereal, and to be witnessed live, and chances are we won't be there in the same spell. But that was the sentiment, and that's the sentiment every time I touch base with that, a home game, a home setting, a theatrical reading. I got to remember that, and that would be my wisdom as a person who sometimes ran from it, and where I didn't feel at home, in a restaurant where I was getting my ass kicked, where I felt resentment, where I had to be obsequious when I didn't want to be. And I know you have to pay the bills, and I got to figure out a way to do that practically. But I know where home is, and it's not a person, it's just a place. It's a place to hang your hat, not to be hoping it will be a savior, but it's me there, not there. Meaning it's not that place that invigorates me, it's how I present to it, to the audience, to the people. And not bringing my nerves, not bringing my neuroses, not bringing what happened outside. I couldn't do that in the restaurant. I would get that speech at the pre-shift all the time. Don't bring your problems out on the floor. And I'm like, this is one of my problems. You know what I'm saying? And they're right, because it's a business, and it's a business of hospitality. And if you can't rise above it, then, you know, you're going to have friction. But don't bring it to the place you love. Don't bring it to the theater. Don't bring it to your auditions. Don't bring it to your agent. Don't bring it to your headshots. Don't bring it to the set. Because you would hear that. Because Ray Liotta's mom was sick and passed away while he shot Goodfellas. Poor bastard. The greatest opportunity of his career coincided with one of the worst parts of his lifeline, losing his mom. And so that's the cruelty of why that these things aren't people. They aren't more important. But I bet you he was able to survive what was always inevitably going to be a hardship. It would probably have been a little easier being on a movie set than being in a coal mine and losing your mom, because life goes on. So enjoy it, and don't bring, you know, don't fart in the elevator, man. Don't ruin a good thing when you get your opportunities. I guess I'm really using horrible metaphors at this point. Anyway, I'm like Alexi Lawless, bad analogies. Little World Cup humor there. But we'll wrap it up, because I don't want to miss a goal in the second game here. But the song last week was Alex Chilton by the Replacements. I mentioned that. And this week's song, I have a bit of an issue. I think the all-time list changes as I listen to other stuff, or I've messed up and done some stuff out of order. But the next song on the list that is different, because now there's a song I already did. I think I just kind of got lost in the shuffle, maybe without my glasses. But I will get on all the songs, but I'll do two today and put those up next week. But I'll put Alex Chilton in this one, and the link to the podcast I was on with my buddy Rawle D. Lewis. But the song this week is Cities in Dust by Susie and the Banshees. Now, I know you probably, maybe, I don't know. That's definitely an aged, dated band to some. They maybe are credited with like early iteration of the goth ethic, the goth chic thing. She was famous for her Cleopatra eye makeup and her very expressive singing, and the band kind of rocked. Robert Smith of The Cure, I think, was once a member of the Banshees, which is incredible that he'd be in two amazing bands of that genre and ilk. But they may have started out as goth, but they wound up being hit makers, and they got jams. And this Cities in Dust has a industrial sound, and like it's danceable. For me, they're danceable, and you would hear them at parties or in soundtracks, and you wouldn't know who they were, but it was of a time, sure. But Cities in Dust has a really cool chorus and a really dramatic opening, and to me, it's my favorite of theirs. There's some other jams of theirs that I enjoy. What's that one? Dear something or other. I'm blanking on it. They got a ton of songs though, like the essential Susie and the Banshees is going to be all jams, but Cities in Dust has kind of got a bop to it, and that's the song today. And I don't know if I've mentioned this song, but I did mention it in the podcast, and it's one I skipped somewhere along the line, so I don't want to go back. But People Have the Power by Patti Smith is another song on my all-time list. Definitely bohemian chic. She wound up being a great writer. Always was, I should say, but of prose. We know her poetry. We know Because the Night is a Bruce song, but she did the words, and they're elevated. You know, love is a ring, the telephone, that, love is a hunger disguised. It's a fucking great song, and she's a great artist. I probably only know that one, and there's another one that, but People Have the Power was like sort of a resurgence in the 90s, and it's an anthem, and it's a hard rocker, and it's very true and very, if you're in a cynical mood, it's, we really don't, man. Fucking, we're run by blah, blah, blah. And it's true that we are and that we do. And that's why artists really vibe out on People Have the Power. And it's got a great chorus. And famously, Queens of the Stone Age played this song when they were, remember they were shot up at the Bataclan, I think, was a theater in Paris. There was a terrorist attack at a concert with the Queens of the Stone Age in Paris. And then when they kind of got either at the Grammys or at some big event, they got to come out and be like, at least thank God you guys survived and you, what a trauma you went through. And Bono and the lead singer of the Queens of the Stone Age, they did a version of People Have the Power, Patti Smith song. And maybe she even guessed it on that, but I vividly remember that. But it's a great song. It's up there with like Keep on Rockin' in the Free World, People Have the Power. It's very anthemic and worth a listen. So, but Cities and Dust is the one on the all-time list. I'm going back because I had an omission. So I'll put 2 in the box next week. This week you're getting Alex Chilton by The Replacements, which is a banger. And, oh boy, we already got a goal. Okay, I got to go. Thank you, Death Session 97, and thank the Gods of Art for, getting me through the... not the gauntlet, but the trail of opportunity. All right, let's call it that. All right, peace.